Hello and welcome to the Bonus Points podcast. I'm your host, Joe Garrett, as always being joined by Ollie Guy.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Ollie. Welcome to the show. So we are back once again doing a brand new game. Before we go too much into the game we're doing in this episode, is there anything you want to say as kind of a follow-up to last episode, which was Last of Us Part 2?
Ooh. Yeah, there is actually. How did you know that?
I could see it in your face. There was a twitch in your eye. You were a little bit uncomfortable. There's something you wanted to get off your chest. I don't know what it was.
I don't know if you know what I was going to say somehow, but I was going to say...
Not at all. Well, it's just because, obviously, I just knew it was a bit of a controversial game, the last one we did, and then there was a few comments with people kind of talking about some of the discussions we made, so it just felt like if there was a game that might need extra kind of following up, same as like Undertale, I guess, so I just didn't know whether you wanted to address any of the comments or if you had anything else you wanted to mention.
No, it was just, now that I'm further away from it, I appreciate the game a lot more than I did at the time. When we did the list, I had just been living in The Last of Us for about 35 hours. And it's a lot, and it is, very bleak. But actually, now I'm further away from it, I do appreciate it a lot more because I'm looking at the whole picture rather than thinking I spent 4 hours smashing someone's head in or I spent 3 hours shooting people in the back. Whereas now it's like I can appreciate it more, and I'm actually happy that it's above the first one on the list.
That was going to be my next question. Are you more kind of secure in it being that way around?
Yeah, the second one is definitely... I prefer the story of the first one, but the second one is just better. So
yeah. That's not what I thought you were going to say, because they've obviously, since we recorded the last episode, they released the remake of Part 1.
Yeah.
And you kind of sent me a quote from a review that you watched where they were basically mirroring what you said in the last episode, basically about how the second one is, arguably too brutal, and the first one is a more enjoyable experience, because it is, less violent, I guess.
Yeah, and I do still think that, but being further away from Last of Us 2 makes me appreciate it more. But Sam, the guest of that episode, said something to me in the pub the other day where he heard that Neil Druckmann, the director, said that The Last of Us 1 is a story about love and The Last of Us 2 is a story about hate. And actually, when you look at it through that lens, it's quite clear that that's what's going on.
Reached the goal on both attempts there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And the only thing I'll say is just for some of the comments that there was a few that, I don't know, maybe we seemed a little bit annoyed, almost as if we were saying if you didn't enjoy the game, you were wrong. I think if you listen carefully to what we say, I don't think we ever say that. In fact, I definitely say the opposite. I say I understand why you wouldn't like this game because it is, so challenging and gruesome. But, what we were talking about when we were saying about people being unreasonable was in terms of like tweeting death threats and like saying that it's just awful or whatever. That's what we're saying is unreasonable. If someone doesn't like the game, obviously we're not saying that you're wrong, and we did say it in the last episode, but I think it kind of got a bit lost during the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Any of that stuff, tweeting death threats, saying a game's got forced wokeness or any of those other stupid things, like that term's always so stupid. I really hate that term, like forced wokeness. Like, my friends in Brighton are on the LGBTQ spectrum, I guess is what it's called. I don't have a forced woke life. Like, it's just how my life happens to be.
I mentioned to someone, I won't say who they are, not that what they said was wrong, but basically they asked me what games I've been playing, and I mentioned that I'd been playing it for the podcast, and they're like, "Oh, is that like the woke one?" I was like, for something they hadn't even played. They'd played the original, they hadn't played it, but like the represent, like the I guess the idea of it is that it is the woke one. Like, that was the first thing that they mentioned about it. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Which if you haven't heard anything and that's all you've heard, I think that stuff can be taken too far and can sometimes be a bit, not wrong, but just a bit cringy, I guess, when it does seem so like forced. But I don't think that's what The Last of Us 2 is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, should we move on to so this was your choice of game. Do you want to kind of set up what it is?
Yes, so the Wikipedia entry says, The Beginner's Guide is an interactive storytelling video game created by Davey under the studio name Everything Unlimited Limited, which is great. The game was released in 2015. The game is narrated by Reedon and takes the user through a number of incomplete and abstract game creations made by a developer named Coda. Reedon challenges the player to try and come to understand what type of person Coda is from exploring these spaces in a first-person view.
Okay, I guess before we say anything more about it, obviously we are going to completely spoil this game. It is an extremely short game. I completed it in just over an hour and 15 minutes it took me to play through it. It's on Steam. It's only playable on PC now, really. It's very cheap. It's very short. If you want to go and play through it before listening to the podcast, it's a very easy one to do if you do have a PC. I will say is that from personal experience, it struggles to run on some modern PCs. So if you have a 12-core CPU, it won't run. You know, there may be something you could do to work out to get it to run. I couldn't, and I ended up breaking my PC in an attempt to play this game. I've got it fixed now. Just that as a bit of a warning. But we're going to spoil this game. It's definitely worth playing through before listening to this conversation. There'll be footage in the video version on screen, but it's a game mainly about narration. So you won't get much of what this game is through the visuals. You really kind of need to play it first before listening to this conversation. So I guess only carry on if you know there's no way you're going to play this game and you're just curious what it is and you want to live it through us, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why I picked it, because we also had some people ask why we picked it. Who I'm going to quickly give a shout out to. Can't find the name. Sorry. Someone asked why we picked it. Oh, Tempting Frog 272. And then they also left a nice follow-up message as well. But I can tell you why. It's because we were going to do the Stanley Parable, but we've both played it before. So I felt like the effect of it might be, even though it's probably still really good and they have remade it and added some few things, the effect of it wouldn't be the same as playing something brand new from the creator. So that's basically why I picked the beginner's guide over that.
And another reason.
Well, it's very short. I say that every time. We're playing Death Stranding at the moment, and it's completely taken over my life. So I feel like the only way I'm ever going to stop delivering packages in my spare time is if I physically die. Like, I cannot escape this game.
Yeah, so obviously we do a game every 2 weeks. In order to do a bigger game, you know, a plus 40-hour game, you know, we need to do another shorter game in between. So, yeah, that's another reason. But I think this was just an interesting game to play despite that. So it wasn't only chosen because it's short. It has more value to offer.
Yes.
So you kind of give a brief summary of what it is. Do you kind of want to go into a bit more detail about like what it's like to actually play this game, what the setup is? Because there's really not another game like it, as far as I know.
Yeah, you're right. I think, first of all, it's important to point out that this game is a work of fiction. We had a few people commenting, asking if the characters or the events in the game were real. I'm not saying there's not elements of truth in the game, but like when we're talking about Davey Reedon, who is a real person, we're not going to be talking about him, the actual person. We're talking about the character that he's playing.
So he's almost playing himself.
Game. He's playing
a version of himself, you know.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming that is his actual voice as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And there's definitely elements. There could be. There's not even definitely. There could be elements of real life here, but we could never know. So when we're talking about him, we're not slagging him off. We're just talking about his character in the game. So basically, the game boils down to Davey showing you a collection of games that his friend has made and says, isn't it interesting how if you look at the through line of these games, you start to learn something about this person's personality and their story by looking at the art that they've made. So generally what happens is you get dropped into one of these games that he's made, this person Coda has made, and Davey will say, in this game there is a special puzzle door, there is someone you can speak to, there's a bridge, there's whatever, and that could potentially signify this thing. And then you basically play the game and then he teleports you to the next one. That's kind of the super high level of what happens in the game. But I think, I don't know, it's difficult to say. The themes of the game, there's more, and I understand it might be ironic that we're covering it on a podcast based on the way the game is.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking about that because I was thinking about like some of my critiques of the game, and I was like, how I wish the game was like this, and I'm like, oh wow, that's exactly like what the game is originally about. So it really sets up interesting. So he's basically saying like, yeah, like these are a collection of games that his friend, someone he knows in real life, which I think is important, called Coda, has made these games but never released them, which I think is important. And he even says about how, like, you know, he'll make these games and like try and delete them. Maybe he would show some of these games personally to him, you know, as like, you know, as just as an individual. But it was really just something Coda was doing, you know, for themselves. And then Davey's kind of taken it upon themselves to do this collection and release it. And even from the very beginning, which is something that you don't realize how important it is until the end, is basically, it's very clear that he's done this collection without Coda knowing, and in the hope that Coda sees it. So it obviously kind of shows you, in throughout it, he talks about their friendship, and you're like, oh, well, if he's hoping Coda's going to see it, like, they're obviously not talking anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of stood out in my head very early on. So the first game you put into, when it's like the intro, it kind of just looks like a Counter-Strike like level, looks like Dust, doesn't it really?
Yeah, so he even says it's a Counter-Strike map. That's what he says when he introduces it. He's like, it's an edited Counter-Strike map. And what's happened is you're sitting in there and there's like crates floating and there's like coloured boxes and things like that. And for me, I don't know if we're ready to go straight into this. For me, this was already the first red flag on Davey when he was like, this Coda has left little bits of their personality through this. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, like, I did game design at university, and I was like, I have made 10,000 of these and none of them are my personality. It's just like, oh, what happens if I click this button? Oh, what happens if I do this? And then obviously because it's not released, it's just shared a bit. It's kind of like, what is Davey's motive here, really? And that was the first time that that was right at the beginning, and I was like, something already can tell something isn't right. I didn't know if it was going to be like funny, and he was making a joke, because obviously Stanley Parable was a comedy, or if it was something worse. Yeah,
it seems so like extreme, because it's literally just like random boxes over the place. Obviously just put random, like just an ugly left of a map. And he's trying to find all of this meaning into it. And so my first thought was like, oh, this is going to be a game of people idolizing someone and finding meaning that isn't there. You know, like how people analyze everything in like a Kojima game. And it's like, it's Kojima's genius. But if that game was made by Ubisoft, people wouldn't even like be thinking twice about it. You know, like he can put a advert for like Monster energy drinks or whatever in his game, and people are like, oh, that's cool that he's like making it like real life, you know, and like it's like it's a strand and it's linking it with the real world. But if EA did it, they'd be like, oh, money grabbing, what are they doing? So that's what I thought the message of the game was gonna be after that first game.
Yeah. So basically what I've done, I've written down the themes that I think the game is trying to convey. So basically it plants the seeds of thought in you, but it never wraps them up. And that's okay. Like, that's what it's doing. It's giving you these things to think about and not answering any questions. It's just going, oh, have you thought about it from this angle? And just kind of leaving you to it. Yeah. And just from that first game, I'd written down the dangers of overanalysis, and then audience, artist, content creator, and developer relationship, and how those things come together. You can already see it starting to crumble in that first 5 seconds, it's which I thought was really interesting.
This is something that I've accused you of with David Lynch.
Yeah, I think everyone on Earth is guilty of this. Like, things that they like, they want to, you know, they attribute more to it because they're so into it. And there's also another quite soon after this. I can't remember if it's the one after this or maybe the level after that. But there's one where you walk past a sign that says you are entering, and then like 3 games later you walk past one that says you are exiting, and he's like, well, these two obviously mean that all the games are linked. And it's like, whoa, steady on. Like, pump your brakes a little bit.
Well, there's even sooner than that. There's one where you're going through like a space area. I think it might be the next one when you got the gun, and then you look out a window and you can see like the universe. But if you look down, like the texture's not finished. Like the skybox, like the bottom of the skybox isn't textured or something. Yeah. And it goes like, I love the way you can see the bottom of the universe. No, that just looks like unfinished artwork.
Yeah. And there's also something else in that level that's a bit of a red flag as well, was that so there's the spaceship maze,
the labyrinth,
and then he's like, oh yeah, we'll just skip that, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And that made me think about, you know, myself and my own, because like creating artwork, if someone else was to edit my work and to tell someone what to think, which is like ironically what we do on this podcast. I was like, that is actually bad. And I wrote, it's like reading someone's sketchbook, changing it, and then passing it off as your own. And that is actually awful. And that's what this guy is doing
it's
through
not
the whole
as bad
game.
as passing it off as your own, because it's still giving Coda the credit, but it's always doing it through Davey's lens. And I just think that like what it is, it's like he's come up with his conclusion. This is what Coda's trying to say. I'm only going to point out the stuff that fits it, and then the stuff that doesn't fit in what I want to say, I'm just going to like, we're just going to ignore that, or we'll just skip past it. Don't worry about that bit. Like, that bit doesn't matter because that doesn't align with what I'm thinking.
But it's almost as if Davey is trying to, by doing that, they are maybe not passing the work off as their own, but trying to take credit, or they're trying to push their own idea forward more than they're
making it seem more like a collaboration. It's like they've come up with it and I'm deciphering it for you and delivering it to you. That's my kind of artistry in this is the value I'm adding, but not thinking about how it completely sidesteps the value that the original creator was making,
if any, because they were just unreleased, unfinished.
Exactly. This was never meant to to have gone public at all. They're doing something creative, so there is some thought behind it, but they're not thinking that it's something that's going to be consumed. Like Davey always seems really obsessed about like making it playable. Like, oh, if you do this, it will be more fun, or this will be more rewarding for players. This is too laborious. Whereas Coda has no care about any of that because they're just doing it for themselves. It's like, say if I'm sketching in my sketchbook and I was like, oh, if you added Pikachu in, people would like it more because people like Pikachu. It's like, I don't care, I'm just doodling, like I'm just I think that's like a good way to describe when we say these like are games, like they don't have like UI or anything. They're basically just like maps made in the Source engine, very basic looking. Even this is an older game from when it was made. They really do look more like a doodle in a video game form rather than what you'd think of as a video game. Like, there's really not much gameplay other than walking and looking.
And I think even though that your interpretations of what you take away from each game is obviously unique to you and it's not wrong, stuff that Davey says is like subjectively wrong.
Yeah,
he is just lying about the stuff that you're seeing on the screen.
So you mean objectively wrong? Do you mean?
Objectively wrong? Yeah, objectively wrong. So he's just lying. Like, he's literally saying he's not even having a bad opinion. Because it's not even, but he's just saying it in a way that's like, how can you possibly be coming to that conclusion based on what we're looking at here? And that happens like quite a few times. So he's kind of dropping these hints. The real Davey, he's dropping these hints of like, this is an unreliable person you're listening to. So like, don't take everything at face value, because what we're talking about, the fact that he is doing all these things, kind of isn't really revealed to the end. Yeah. But if you're looking at it and you're actually thinking about it for more than a second, more than what he's showing you, you can see straight through it right away. But it is meant to be a twist that he is not the best person to be hanging out with, basically.
There's hints left throughout, I think, of some of that. Yeah. That's so, like, even when, like, as soon as he said, "Oh, we'll skip the labyrinth," like that stood out to me as a thing. Like, oh, like this isn't done. If this is presented as a way, this is like preserving and presenting these games to the world of this artist. And then like, oh, you're changing stuff. And then there's like another one where you're basically going up like a staircase and you gradually get slower and slower and slower until the point where you're basically not moving. And you see the door opens and you're never meant to reach the door, And then he's like, okay, well, if you press enter, you can speed up and then you can look inside the door so we can find out. And it's like I can even see there, even if Coda wasn't meant to release it, like the stopping moving is more interesting and never being able to see inside of the door. Yeah, it actually kind of reminds me of I only just thought of this now. So in the Stephen King novels, The Dark Tower, like the whole point is like he's trying to find his way to this dark tower, and it's this big like what's going to be in this dark tower. And then when you get to the point where you're about to enter the dark tower, like there's a note from the author who basically says like, this should be the end of the story. Like, whatever I write for being in the tower is not going to be as good as whatever like the promise is. Like, if you want the best ending for this like long series of novels, stop reading now. This is like the most beautiful ending. But I know that won't satisfy some people, So you can carry on reading if you want. And like, that's so weird that it's in the but I love that. And I bet no one stopped reading. But stopping reading probably would have been better.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird game because it's like, and it's like it doesn't want to be analysed, and that has to be okay. That's the only way you can really look at it. But also, on the other side of that is that we don't necessarily have to listen to Davey, just because the real life Davey Reedon thinks that talking about games or whatever it is they're trying to say is bad. It doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% true. So it's even that's like something I've been trying to wrap my head around, which is why for this I've got so many notes, because it's just like
there was a kind of a cool transition. So at first so Davey, like, it gets to a point where Coda's games kind of they kind of get darker, and there's kind of like talk about, you know, is Coda like lonely or even depressed, and like, are the games almost a cry for help? And, you know, he does a lot of games about kind of being stuck in prison or talking to himself, and then Davey is kind of taking that as, oh, this is my friend in trouble, like I need to help him. And so during that period at first, I'm kind of almost along with Davey, like subconsciously, and I am thinking about Coda, and I'm analysing Coda, and then really I think what you're meant to be doing is analysing Davey, but you're kind of like trying to work out both of them, when really I feel like Coda, you know, as I say, this was basically just his little sketchbooks, and, you know, he might have just been making games about prisons because he likes making games about prisons. And like we're reading too much into a thing that we shouldn't have any access to anyway. But, you know, it's you should more be looking at the person analysing rather than like the original creator. And I just can't think of another game where like my brains had to do that sort of gymnastics when playing through it.
That part you're talking about, there was one scene that like really got to me. Like, I was literally like genuinely upset by the scene where you're on the phone and you got the dialogue choices. Yeah. And your characters, I can't remember what they're talking about. Well, one of the characters on the phone is like, can you please tell me the solution now to get out? And the other one is like, I don't have the information that you want. And I was reading that and I was thinking, it is so sad that one person has written this. Yeah. But they've written both sides of this conversation. One person has written this back and forth. That's like, because they cannot write anything else because they don't have the answers. So just to set it up, it's after like they've done a bunch of games all set in a prison, and the idea is like it's talking to a past version. So one version's escaped and trying to tell the other one how to escape, and then they're like, how do I escape? And then you end up kind of basically saying like, you got to be like something like, you got to be just truthful and like tell me how you feel. And they're like, really? Like, is that like gonna, like, why would that work? And they're like, you know, just do it, just like say how you feel, and that's basically just where it ends. No, it's just horrible. It was so horrible. And then the way it was like saying, oh yeah, speak to me, and then it just kept saying like speak, and it was like repeating loads, and I was just like, this is so depressing. But luckily, that was only it was only 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It was only 5 minutes. And then but then the other one was where like you're kind of going through like kind of like a cave type place, and it's the one where they set up saying this is an online game, and you're like, you can put down messages and read messages from other people, which, you know, isn't true. Like, they're all messages written from Coda as you're playing through. Like, what did you think about that one? Well, with everything with this game, I was like, they are written by Coda, but they could also be written by Davey, and we would never know. So which ones of these were written by Coda, and which ones of these were written by Davey? At that point, I wasn't thinking that. Like, at that point, because one of the things I guess we can kind of get more into a bit now is one of the reveals later on is that Davey has gone beyond skipping sections or building bridges over sections, but actually added things as well. Yeah. Like he added like the big ones, like a lamppost at the end of a bunch of the levels. And it was obviously Davey thinking that that's what it needed. That's like the reward for like the end of the game, and to put meaning to it. Just like almost if like, oh, I know what Coda's trying to do here. This would help him, and then adding it in, but never mentioning it, you know, to the player playing through that he had added that in. Yeah, and that whole stage, is that the one that's actually on a stage? Well, the lamppost is in a bunch of the levels. Yeah, but isn't like I know. I'm thinking of the key art for the game is the lamppost on the stage. That's why I'm thinking of that.
Yeah,
like
the one on the
artwork,
stage is when you got to try and talk to the photographer.
Yeah, which I feel like that whole thing was almost like taking the mick a little bit out of people overanalyzing by going the other way and oversimplifying it to the point where like it's ridiculous. Like, you have social performance anxiety. Well, how about doing a social performance? Like, and all of the people
on a stage.
Yeah, they're on a stage, and all the people around you become pinball pingers. So when you go near them, they push you away. Like, I was like, this has got to be.
And then
surely.
you back away, and it's all like the cage is coming down.
Yeah,
and that's you retreating into yourself.
Yeah. It had some cool moments like that. It's clever, but also the whole time I'm thinking like, don't overthink it. Don't read into it too much. It doesn't want to be read into. But then also
don't read in. It's weird because you're not meant to read into the individual games like as they are as Cody wrote them, but you are trying to read into the game as a whole. Like it's so many layers of meta that you're trying to read through. Hopefully, those of you that have just been listening and haven't played the game are following along and can understand what this game is. Should we move on to kind of talk about like kind of where it goes towards the ending?
Yeah. So throughout the game, he's kind of telling you what's going on. Oh, Coda did this because they felt this way, or they did that because they felt that way. And then it kind of gets revealed that you get one last game from Coda, or Davey receives one last game from Coda that is impossible to finish, and the only way to see the finish is to mod it, is to break it, which Davey obviously does because he loves doing that. And then in doing so, statements from Coda are revealed directly to Davey that are saying things like, stop showing people my work, I'm perfectly happy as I am, please leave me alone, which kind of casts the rest of the game in a new light. And a lot of the things that Davey said about Coda are now, you can see for certain that they were wrong, rather than just having your suspicions. So there's things that he says about Coda's behavior that I think maybe Coda isn't a hermit or recluse. Maybe they're just cutting him out.
Yeah.
But he's like, oh, they must be cutting everyone out. Like, no, it's just you. It's just you are not a nice person. You are a toxic person in this person's life, and you need to back off. Like, that stalking angle and toxic relationship angle came in towards the end, and I was really thinking, like, especially the way that Davey is so patronizing. Like, oh, Coda's figured out how to do a puzzle. Oh, aren't they clever? Like, it really gave me that kind of... I mean, I'm in no position to talk about this angle, but being a woman creating art and how men must act. And then the desperation of these final acts is like, my God. Like, Davey is horrible.
I mean, you can even just see it in, like, the final game. It's like, it's almost just like a big F you to Davey, isn't it? It's like long and slow. There's like a puzzle where... and I'll give an epilepsy warning here for people watching the video podcast because it is flashing images. Just wait a second, just to give it time, like genuinely look away. But basically, you're going through like an invisible maze, and then if you hit a wall, it like flashes up like red lights, like literally making it as horrible to solve. And then it's almost like Coda knows that Davey won't resist trying to solve it to find if there's a hidden thing, and just almost like to punish him and just say like stop it, and then. Straight after that, it's like a 6-digit combination lock where it's just you got to randomly guess it to do it. And then, of course, when we're playing it through, like Davey puts a bridge over it and he tells you the code. You can carry on to like keep seeing like the meaning that is going next, like as it's kind of completely going over his head. Like that, this whole game is Coda saying like, no, don't, like stop.
and also, it's not the first time that Coda has done that, because Davey mentions that Coda sent a file of about 100 games. That were all called playable games, and each one was just an empty room. And Davey says, "Oh, I did play all of them though." And it's like,
just in
mate,
case.
just back
There's
off
like
and leave this person alone.
It's also quite telling. We didn't mention it earlier. It's made very clear that Coda kind of didn't want Davey to even see any of these games, apart from there's one game, the one where you're cleaning the house, which Davey says it's when Coda was kind of happiest, and it's like it's quite a nice game. It's got kind of nice music, and you're kind of just tidying a house and like talking to like a housekeeper as they're tidying, and Davey says like, oh, this is basically the only game that Coda like wanted me to see and like called me up to say come and play it.
And I think what's interesting about that particular game, so you're walking around a house and you've got a housekeeper with you, and they're saying, they kind of give you like affirmations about life. But what I thought was interesting was that they're saying things like, so I've written it down, keeping a clean house keeps a clean soul, but the house is actually impossible to clean because every time you clean it, it actually, something else breaks. And not only that, the original game lasts like for an infinite amount of time.
Yeah.
And Davey had to break it in order to finish it.
Yeah, yeah. So like, he edits it so you can leave and then...
Yeah, so what I think actually without those edits, and if you look at that, it's not really a happy game at all. It's actually quite horrible. It's like saying your life will be fulfilled once you clean this house, and it is impossible to clean it. Yeah,
and it's always the same things that keep getting messy or whatever. But Davey kind of just misses that point and just lets you leave. And there's a few other times. There's a time you go in prison and you went to spend like an hour or something in prison. Like, obviously there's like a point, but he's like, oh yeah, but we can skip that. Like that doesn't matter. Like you get the idea of what it would be like to wait there for an hour. And it's like, no, because the idea of waiting for an hour compared to actually doing it, like by the time that's over, you would be in a very different mindset.
Also, there's a danger here of me overreading, as there always is, especially with this game. I've got a feeling that the reason that Coda kept making prisons is because prisons are very easy to make if you're learning how to make a game. Because you make a game, you make a room. Oh, what can I do? Oh, I copy and paste the room. I copy and paste that room 10 times. I'll add another floor of rooms. Oh, I've made a prison. Like, it's very easy to make that kind of architecture. It's probably the easiest out of it. That and a hotel will probably be the easiest things you can make. And a prison's even simpler than a hotel. So.
Yeah, and there were, but the things, there were like bars, and there was like purpose things to make it annoying to exit. Like there's one where it says like, oh, if you want to exit the prison, like you got to like touch the lamp and then touch the table and then it's and then you go then when you go back in and you go through the sequence, like the first step of the sequence is meant to be a table you touch isn't there, and so it feels like it is like almost purposely like trolling the player like to be stuck in the prison. So I think maybe the idea of a prison came first because they could make an easy room, but Coda was definitely purposely making like horrible prisons to be stuck in as well.
But also learning the lesson of, in a game engine, being able to go click on this, then click on this, then click on this is also a good lesson to learn if you want to learn.
And a lot of the artwork looks like it could be like in some like library, like some asset library or something, or like Gmod.
On that asset library thing, what I thought was very interesting. Not going to overread into this at all because you could, but I'm not going to.
Ollie, you need to let your guard down. Like
no.
This is what we do for every game.
There is nothing to overread.
Even though this game's about it, like it's fine.
There's nothing to overread. But I've used the Source Engine before, and the only true Source Engine asset in this game is the bridge that they make at the end. You know the bridge with the divided, and it's orange, but it's got lines along it. When you make something in Source, that's what everything looks like.
Yeah.
So when things weren't looking like that at the beginning, I was like, this isn't what Source looks like. I know what it looks like. So there's a level where you go through like an abstract. I think it's called Down. And you're just kind of going downstairs and like suddenly it becomes like big triangles and stuff. And I remember thinking then like, this isn't what Source looks like at all. But then when that bridge popped up at the end, I was like, oh yeah, that is. Like that is a default asset. Like you could just drop that in and that's what it would look like. But I don't think there's
any the Counter-Strike map, I guess.
And the Counter-Strike map,
That's the other exception. I was actually, when it started off, I got a bit excited because I know the Stanley Parable, very like spoilers for the Stanley Parable. If you haven't played it, go play it. It's incredible. But like you go into other games, like in the Stanley Parable, other real games.
Okay, so I played it before it got licensed and sold as like a massiff game. So I played it when it was only like an hour long.
You played like the mod version of it?
Like the original version, yeah.
Oh, so in it, like, it's just like spoilers, but it's very relevant. Like you go into Portal, you go into Minecraft in it. I'm sure there's other games I'm not thinking of. And so when it started off with this kind of Counter-Strike thing, I was like, maybe like, are we going to go into like City 17 from Half-Life or something. Now I was kind of hoping that there was going to be a bit more of that, or even just using those assets in wrong places. I did notice that the machine gun that you have sounds very similar to the submachine gun in Half-Life 2.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is the same.
It sounded like the timing was slightly like altered. It had more of a rhythm, but that's a gun that I can hear very well, the actual sound.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I think that I would maybe appreciate the game more if I played through it again. I feel like knowing the twist kind of makes the game better.
Yeah, I feel like
nothing wrong with it the first time round, but the second time round, I feel like it'd actually be quite funny to play it again and hear Davey's like interpretations of what's going on, because he's just so wrong so many times.
I felt like I was quite onto him quite early on.
Yeah,
like not to like I didn't know what the full ending would be, but I like from pretty early on I was like, oh, this is Davey looking too much into it, and like the way that altering the levels and changing things, I was quite onto like, oh yeah, this is like a toxic way to be doing this to your friend's game. It was very clear that they aren't friends anymore, and that Coda was not sending these games to him in the intention. Coda didn't want any feedback or anything. And it seems like Dave even says about it, like that's like a disagreement that he had with Coda, was Davey was basically saying games should be playable, you should get feedback, and Coda didn't want that. But Davey's doing it anyway, and like releasing this collection of games, supposedly on Steam, in the hope to change Coda's mind somehow. Like, so I was onto that very early on. I just didn't know how much Coda was going to directly respond through their games.
There was one line that retroactively it didn't make me laugh when he said it, but when I thought about what was going on, it was the one in the lecture hall. There's a game set in a lecture hall, and you start off as someone in the audience listening to a lecturer, and then the game changes perspective and you are the lecturer. But when you turn into him, what he's looking out at is an empty lecture hall, and at the back is a huge, like, horrifying monster. And it's almost as if to be like, oh, it's really nerve-wracking giving a speech. Like, this is what, oh my God, this is so scary. When that game starts, Davey says, oh, bear with this one, it's a bit more goofy. It's like, this isn't goofy, it's horrible.
do you know what it kind of reminds me of is when I think it's when we were doing Killer 7, and you were saying you hate when there's like a game which is not completely conventional. People go like, oh, what were they smoking when they made this one? Like,
it's like that, yeah.
And you were saying about how much you hate that, but this felt like an equivalent where like Davey's kind of trivializing everything that it was by saying like, well, this one's a bit strange, when it's...
That's a really good point. That is a really good point about that. And also when he says, he doesn't say literally the meaning of this game is, but he says something along the lines of, when you idolize someone, you don't see the small imperfect things around them, about the lecture. And it's like, where did you get that from? Like, looking at the game as it is.
Yeah.
But then I feel like the game is saying you can't tell anyone else their interpretation is wrong. But at the same time, they're dangling in front of you the worst interpretations you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. And then, go back to the final level. So you kind of go through that. No, it's fine. It's a short game, so I knew we were going to be jumping all over the place here. Yeah. It's like, let's talk about gameplay first, then story. Like, it doesn't quite work like that for this. So you go through like those laborious stuff. There's like those mazes, and then that code, and then eventually it gets to the point where it's just text on the wall with Coda just saying like, basically like, dear Davey, like, stop. Essentially, like, what you're doing is wrong. Like, leave me alone. And then like Davey's like, kind of like, starts like analyzing the message, but then that's kind of, I think, the first time it kind of starts sinking in. And this is when the game kind of broke a bit for me in terms of my enjoyment, because I'm sort of like Davey's obviously played through that game before. Like, he's not recording this commentary his first time playing it. It's not like he's doing a live commentary, but then he's almost having that revelation while he's recording that commentary again, but then he's edited it and put it in, and then it kind of gets to the point where he's like, you know what, I'm just going to like leave. Like, sorry, I know I was going to narrate this, but I'm just going to go now. And I'm like, but no, but like, what, you just talking that now and then you've edited that dialogue and edited it in? Like, it breaks the format of what it had been up to then of like a documentary video game. And it does that, with the goal to try and tell a more emotional story. but I think I would have much preferred it. And I realized this is where I felt a bit hypocritical for like, actually, this should have been better. I kind of wish it just stuck to that format and was just a bit more subtle. And maybe Davey, there'll be hints that he kind of realizes that what he's done is wrong and toxic, but doesn't fully realize it and still thinks releasing this game might turn it around. And it was done with a nice package and that was put out rather than the game kind of breaking and kind of getting a bit, more... I don't know, it kind of breaks almost another fourth wall and stops becoming what it was at the beginning. Yeah,
especially as it was like quite masterfully done, how the quotes were presented. It was like, okay, Davey, I'm going to talk to you the only way you seem to understand, and I'm going to present these as art. Like, they are art. You are looking at art. I know you're going to understand it. But the ending actually really reminded me of Inside, Bo Burnham's Inside, which I think suffers from the same problem in that. So it does the same thing where, like, when you start to realise something is wrong, the narrator also starts to realise something is wrong. And Bo Burnham Inside does the same thing. But when you finish watching it, you're like, what? So this guy had a mental breakdown, filmed it, edited it, uploaded it to Netflix? No, exactly. Of course not. Like,
yeah.
But then, so we had a comment from Timon Morgie on YouTube who said that they felt like it's more as though Davey is speaking over your shoulder then you're playing a collection of games you've downloaded off the internet.
Yeah, but only at the end. Like, at the beginning, it isn't. At the beginning, it's set up like, it's almost like the behind the scenes for Valve games. It's like, hey, I'm Gay Ben here, and you can, like, it's set up like that as, because that is kind of what it is. And then at the end, the format of what you're playing changes. And I wish that they, it would have been harder to hit the emotional heights that they did with that. But I wish they gave the players a little bit more trust for that we understand what Davey's doing here, and just stuck a little bit more rigidly to that format, and maybe just have like him saying the dialogue he wants to say, which you assume is scripted, but maybe have a bit of a hesitation, or maybe obviously he kind of improv that a little bit as he had that realization while he was recording it, but still kind of saved it and still put this together in the package that he thinks is going to be released, and the world is going to see whatever genius Coda is, and then Coda's going to love him basically.
Yeah. Do you feel you are an artist, whether you like it or not, and you are a content creator? Do you feel like that this game has changed your perspective or given you anything new to think about? And I've sort of taken that question a little bit from Sandro Corridge. I added a bit, but I've basically done what I shouldn't be doing. So I've taken that question and added a
bit. They asked me what the name of my dog is, didn't they?
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what. They said, as content creators, did you connect with the message of this game? But I feel like that's poised for you a lot more than it is for me. So,
well, I want to hear your opinion as well. It's not changed my opinion on something. This even for what I do, like in terms of for my Stampy stuff, it's something that I've seen. It's so I always do nothing philosophical or on any level of what Davey is assuming Coda's trying to do here, but I'm constantly leaving hints and secrets to things, and I have a villain that's going to attack, and I will leave little Easter eggs and hints about what's going to happen next. And because I've become known to do that, people keep seeing that when things aren't there. There might be just a block left out on the road or something, and someone will be like, why was that block there and stuff, and it's it's just I forgot to break it or something, and so on that of a basic level, I've seen people reading into things that wasn't intended, but it's so very different because these are public YouTube videos that I'm putting out, and on counter to Coda, I want as many people as possible to watch them. So it's a different thing, and I love that stuff. I love it when someone is reading too much into it. It's funny, and there's been times where people have been expecting something that I'm going to do, and I'll be like, God, that's better than what I was going to do. Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah.
Then I steal their idea, and they'll never know.
The guy that wrote Breaking Bad said that he did that all the time. He was like, I would just put out what the episode idea was, and then whatever they said, I would make that the solution.
So then they think I'm a genius.
Yeah.
How about for you? Because obviously, we've got the bonus point stuff, but then obviously, with your artwork, has there been anything that you've run into that you could draw any parallels?
I think that I can be guilty of what Davey does.
Yes,
in this game.
I agree.
And I can get so excited by my own ideas that I have to tell people that this is my idea. I don't think I've gone as far as he's gone. Like, I don't think that I use my own opinions and weaponize them and tell people that they're wrong. Everyone is open to their own interpretation. And it's not that I think mine is right and someone else's is incorrect. And the whole lamppost thing, like putting the lampposts in the game, there's no difference to you finding something that isn't there and saying, "Oh no, it is there. It is there. It definitely is there," because you're putting your own.
No, that's
your
absolutely.
own lampposts down.
No, that's. I don't agree with that, because he's putting that in and then presenting like that was originally there. Like, that's like, say we were saying about David Lynch. That's like saying you show me a clip of Twin Peaks and you've literally edited it and like added in like another character or
no, I don't mean like that.
This is how the show was.
I mean like saying that the idea is there and being like this alludes to this idea is not that far from saying from. I
think there's a difference to saying like, oh, I think that this is what the meaning is and I see it like this is different from saying this is how it is and then editing that and then this is what I think, like, because you're editing both ends there. Rather than like seeing things that maybe aren't there. You're adding the thing that you want to be there. Yeah,
I don't mean adding it like, I don't mean literally editing in a lamppost. I mean by expressing it, you're almost adding it. That's what I'm saying. Like by expressing the angle,
I agree with that. But I'm just saying there's a big difference there. Like you're almost saying like it's almost the same between the two, and I'm saying no. I think they're still very different levels.
Yeah, and the other thing is, there was one line that Davey said, which I think I've written down. I cannot imagine living without external validation. Yeah. And I saw that line and I thought of Davey as a real person who has released this massive, hugely popular game, industry-changing game, and Coda, who no one, potentially doesn't even exist, but no one cares about. And that did make me think that there are so many people, so many artists and everything else, and all they want is external validation and they cannot get it. And that must be like awful. Like that was the other thing that hit me. Luckily I'm not like that, it's fine, but like I could imagine being like, you know, you see it all the time online, people being like, oh, I made, you know, on Reddit, like, oh, I made this portrait of my sister, and it gets 0 likes, 0 comments, and you think like, God, that person's spent so much time on that and no one cares. And Davey saying I cannot imagine living without it, it's like that is the life of millions of artists, is there is no validation, there's nothing.
But there's also there's no win either way, because if you are just after that external validation and you get it, like say if you have a hit, you make the Stanley Parable or anything, like then it's like, oh, how do I follow up that? And then you can end up being in a case where your whole life is, you know, looking back at that, and that was the peak was there, and like how, you know, the difficult second album, you know, like it's like,
it's never enough.
No, you all you got to do is learn just to be happy with creating the thing, and like, oh, I made this thing, I'm happy with it, I'm proud of that. Like that's you got to get your satisfaction for that, otherwise you'll never be happy. And like this is crossing over to a conversation I've had with loads of people on YouTube, and it's a big thing with YouTubers struggle with stats and just they're obsessed with views, and you know, like that's how they got to get their validation. And this view wasn't a hit, okay, like this video wasn't a hit, right, look on to the next one, and like that's never healthy. Whether you're hugely successful on YouTube or not successful on YouTube, it's almost as bad either way. Like it's never gonna make you happy if that's like where you're getting your validation.
Yeah, and also some people. There's also the other side of it, which is some people don't want it. They just want to make these things to themselves, and that's also fine.
Yeah,
the game itself is constantly presenting like grey, not morally grey, but like grey scenarios that are like they're fine to just be grey. You don't have to solve it. And I think there's even a line in the game where he says that this is not my problem to solve.
Yeah,
and the whole game is kind of like that. It's like it's presenting you with these ideas.
Well, and that's Coda talking about Davey, isn't it? It's saying like
it's like just think about these things and take them away. There is no massive overarching thing here. It's just I want you to think about these themes, and if you can, that'd be great. That's
I love that line as well, because it's basically Coda saying like, you know, Davey, your problems aren't mine to solve, but it's also like and my problems aren't yours to solve. Like, why are you trying so hard to solve what I don't need you to do? And like, I don't think Coda's a game developer, like professional, like there's no mention of them releasing a commercial product. Like, I bet they have another normal job, and this is like their, just a thing they do on the side for fun to express themselves. Like, there's no mention that is what Coda is as a professional.
Yeah, and also we don't know Coda's age, we don't know their gender, we don't know anything about them. The only thing, the closest truth that I could find, I can't remember if I've already said this because I've scrolled up on my notes, is that Davey said they met Coda at a game jam. And I feel like that's the closest to the truth you can get out of this game. But then, straight away, Davey says, oh, well, Coda was a recluse. And it's like, well, whether at the game jam or not, like, they can't be both those things. They can't be working as part of a team in a game jam and also hate people and socializing. So, like, even that was a bit like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Because there's one game that has a woman sitting on a chair in it.
Is that the stage one again? The photographer?
No. It's one of the prison ones. And you're on the outside of the prison looking in. There's someone sitting in there crying. And they don't have a box head.
Oh, God, the audio was horrible on that one, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you're watching the video version, all the characters have boxes on their heads that basically just say what they're doing. But this woman didn't. And even that's like, that was put there for a reason.
Yeah.
But don't think about it.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's so hard not to become a Davey while
I know.
Why do you think it's called The Beginner's Guide?
Because it's a person learning how to use a game engine.
Oh, what, you think this is Coda learning
This is Coda
how to
going
use
through a
Source?
tutorial, yeah. That was my takeaway. The Beginner's Guide to Game Design. Oh, I'm learning to use an engine. That was my takeaway.
Maybe.
Anyway,
It didn't feel like it was like an evolution of like I feel like I suppose the levels do gradually kind of get a bit more detailed.
The dialogue system gets upgraded. The environments look better.
But because doesn't Davey open? Doesn't he call it The Beginner's Guide? Isn't he calling his collection of Cody's games The Beginner's Guide? Is it like The Beginner's Guide?
Remember. If I could remember,
Coda,
I would have said that. But I thought it was because I'm learning
I think Davey
to play.
calls it The Beginner's Guide, I believe. I may be wrong. In the video version, it'll be up on screen to clarify either way.
Yeah. No, that's what I assumed it meant. Why, have you got another read?
No, I just couldn't work it out. I just wasn't sure. So I just didn't know. It was something that I didn't really think about to the very end. Until I thought, why is it called The Beginner's Guide?
You're like,
I kept getting
that
it
was
wrong.
the beginning. Where's the rest of it?
I kept in my head thinking it's called The Gamer's Guide, which is like a Disney show. Because it's a game, and so I can't I was even trying to Google something about it, and I was like, oh, I can't find it because there's a show with the same name. It's like, no, it's called The Beginner's Guide.
Yeah. Here's something for you. Obviously, there's no answer to this. I'm just curious of your thoughts. This is something that the game made me think of, which was, what is the moral relationship of a company like IGN or anyone online that makes reviews or content, even the bonus points? What is our moral obligation to the actual artists that create the things that we then use to create other things, if you know what I'm saying? So IGN could not exist without video games.
Mm-hmm.
So do they owe it to the artists that create the games to do something more than they're doing?
What are you saying? Should like IGN, or whoever? What more are you suggesting that they should be doing?
I don't know. It's just something I've been thinking about.
It's a scratch your backs. Game developers are willingly sending game codes, review codes, whatever, to these companies. Because it's part of their promotional cycle. They'll bring people in to have like test review. That's part of their marketing. Is we want to. E3 doesn't exist without journalists. The only reason they're doing that expense is it's they can go and do these interviews and so they can show off their games.
Yeah,
it seems to be like a mutual thing in terms of their responsibility. I think. Obviously this crosses the line where it's falsehoods. There's Davey's lying about Coda's games and altering them. I think just, I guess as being as truthful and honest as you can. I guess I kind of think back to the because I can't not talk about it, the Prey review. That was, I think
it was about Dark Souls then.
Not yet. That will come in later. I'll tell you what, when it got to the cave section where they were putting down, these are all messages from other people. It's like, it's just like Dark Souls. Where Prey got I think a 4 out of 10 or something because there was, a game-breaking bug that they couldn't complete, and that tanked the Metacritic score. And Arcane have publicly said they think that hurt the sales was, the fact that altered the review score so much. But it was a horrible situation for both. I don't know, is there a moral responsibility there for like either party? Like, is there another way that could have played out?
What about if you scale that way down to a game that's developed by one person and it's being covered by, someone who is trying to be a success? Like, the person that is making this video or whatever it is about this game, that's their art. But they cannot create it without the other person, the person who made the game originally. And this game made me think about that. I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's quite an interesting...
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist in other media.
Yeah, I think for like reviews, it doesn't matter so much, but more conversations like this, or there's a lot of videos that will be like trying to break down, like, what is the meaning? I'm sure there's a bunch for this game. It's the kind of game that would. And I guess for your example, like... the internet is full of people trying to break down Undertale and like looking at all the, Toby Fox's hidden meanings. And the other big one is Five Nights at Freddy's, which you may laugh about, but apparently that's full of hidden messages and secret meanings and references to real life events. And there's all this stuff breaking it down, and there's not a chance that all of them are actual things that were meant by the creator. But if you kind of frame it as in, well, this is just my theory, you can almost pick and choose whatever you want and say whatever story you want. And, as you say, almost piggyback off that original artwork. But for people that have watched that YouTube video, that might reshape their view of the actual game. And then they might end up agreeing with that meaning rather than formulating their, own opinions or picking up on what the actual intentions were.
It's like you're experiencing this art or film or television and the artist is not there. So if you're letting someone else guide you through it, you're kind of looking at their version of events rather than the real versions of events. And that's quite a weird thing to think about. There's not really a point to this. It's just a weird thing to think about. Like,
as you're
putting yourself out there, creating something, and someone else is chirping other people through it. And it's like, hang on a minute, what are you doing? Like, I did start to wonder if this game was made as a response to the Stanley Parable and people analysing it and, people that search for Stanley Parable explained, that sort of thing. Like, maybe this was made like, I'm going to make something that is impossible to analyse without looking like a fool.
Very possibly. I mean, and it does mention at the beginning, like, hey, I'm the writer of the Stanley Parable. And I don't know whether that line is to almost get you in that mindset of
definitely.
Another one of these. Is. Let's start thinking about it. Like,
it's also to pull the Stanley Parable into the fiction, like the fictional world of this game. Because obviously, as we said at the beginning, he's not playing him. It's not actually him. But he'd like the Stanley Parable to be an element of his character, so he's had to pull that in and say, "Oh yeah, I wrote the Stanley Parable, by the way." So
I guess just the big thing is this is such an extreme version of the fact that like. I don't know about you, but I think these games were stolen.
They were published. They shouldn't have been published, I think, really.
That's the big change. It's different to say, like, if you put your artwork out, you have the response, that, if it gains a following, people are going to analyze it. You can't put out like a music track and then someone says like, oh, I didn't like the chorus, and you'd be like, what? It's like people are going to do that. But I feel that's very different compared to like someone's found like a secret test recording that they did at a studio that wasn't meant to release, and now let's analyze that. Like, that feels more wrong. So it's like, no, because you're trying to find meaning, and they hadn't even they might not have even finished that, or they did it and they were like, oh no, I don't actually mean that. I don't want to release that. I was just having a weird day that day, but that's not how I actually think. That's not the message I want to put. I don't want to release that. That's the way this feels.
That's even the same as, looking at it critically, like we are ranking games like Last of Us 2, AAA, massive game, against Zero Ranger, and those games were not really released the same way.
No,
but we're still looking at them through the same lens. So even that's kind of given me something to think. I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I don't think anything we're doing is wrong or morally bad. Like, we're fine, but it just gives you something to think about.
It's the first time I've thought about that. Like, I never even had a moment's consideration, about that. So, I mean, the only thing I come close to it is I know that when we did the Ooblets one, the Ooblets devs tweeted it, and I was like, oh, they might be watching. And I was like, I think we were very honest, and we talked about what we liked and didn't like about that game. I don't think it affected anything, but I think that's the closest thing, because that is another weird thing is, because that's the other thing when people, let's say if you're doing an IGN review, is they know there's a pretty good chance the creators of the game are going to be watching it. And I think it's especially weirder for them because, say, if they've probably gone to the studio, they probably know those people. And they've probably heard about, like, say if they're all excited about releasing this game and they're working on it, and we've got this grand idea, and they're talking to the journalists about it, the developers, and then you're reviewing that game. Like, how can that not shape the way you're reviewing it when you're knowing like, oh, I remember Phil was really pleased about this new system, but it doesn't really work. But I got to be, and I'm not claiming that they wouldn't be honest, because any corruption in games journalism is completely overblown and basically non-existent. They're not all paid off, I promise. But even subconsciously, it's in the back of your head, because it's like they're seeing the humans that are making it. And I think maybe it's Davey has a bit of obsession with Coda for how Coda actually is, and maybe that's influencing it. Maybe they just think Coda's so natural and cool or whatever.
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
There must be that put into their game.
Yeah, Davey's definitely jealous of Coda's supposed carefree attitude.
Yeah.
Of just being like, oh, I made this game, I'm going to give it to my friends, I don't care. Whereas Davey is like, what do you mean? You got to make it like this, you got to give it to these people, you got to show the world. Whereas, Coda is very much not bothered. But as we were just saying about that, the reviewing thing, the angle that I'm thinking about it from is like, I made a game in my bedroom and you are using my art to propel yourself. You are taking what I've made and you are repurposing it, essentially, to propel what you're doing. And that just feels a bit weird.
I think it's almost stronger in Let's Plays and stuff. There was a lot of animosity at the beginning with Minecraft, where between this was almost before my time, early kind of beta time, where, for the first Minecons, when there was a load of fans of Minecraft, that a lot of them were there to see Yogscast and stuff, and there's even a quote, I can't remember where it came from, so please do your own research for this, but it's something along the lines of either Simon or Lewis basically kind of claiming that they are a big reason why Minecraft became as popular as it did. And then for a while, kind of Mojang weren't really talking to them, and they all, and there was a bit of animosity of all these, creators that were kind of growing, using Minecraft, and I think that's changed now, and Mojang and Microsoft are much more open to the community. And I also, I've met Simon and Lewis, and they're absolutely not arrogant. I'm sure for however that quote came about, they're not there, they're not there like the Beatles saying we're bigger than Jesus or whatever. I know that wasn't their intent for however that was taken, but I feel like, and you look at Nintendo, you can't do Let's Plays of our games for ages, or then, you have to partner with us and share the revenue if you're going to do Let's Plays, until finally now they're like, oh, please play our games. We now realise it helps us and it's actually beneficial.
There is a bit of you're kind of poisoning the well a little bit. If you imagine if me and you, just to make it, less conceptual, me and you do a Let's Play of a Quantic Dream game. And at the ending,
please.
We are laughing, right? We are laughing ourselves silly. And then every single person that watches that video goes, oh, is that the game with the funny ending? And the people that made it are like, it's not meant to be funny. You've poisoned it for every single person by saying...
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah. So that actually leads in quite well.
They've viewed that art through us. They've seen it not as strong as what Davey's done, and we haven't done it intentionally, but they've seen it through the bonus points filter, and our opinions have, shaped what that is. Or, even we'd be like, oh yeah, we've done the Let's Play, but it's too long. We're going to cut out the boring bits,
Exactly.
We've edited it down, and that's changed it. Maybe that scene was meant to be that long, as a break from the previous scene, which was action packed, or they were giving you time to focus. I can't remember what it is, but there's a film that starts with like a really like long shots kind of panning along some cars. And I heard the director commentary and it goes on for so long. And they're like, if you just show a shot long enough, people start analyzing it and like thinking about why it is that. And there's no way to get around that other than just having a really long shot. And so I was thinking about that when it got to the bit when they were stuck in the prison in this game. And it's like, there's no way to to explain being stuck for an hour. An hour's a really long time. That's the majority of this entire experience locked in a prison. Like and then also, it's not meant for anyone to play and enjoy themselves.
The same thing based on that is that even if it didn't have a reason, it doesn't give anyone the right to edit it. So it's just, I don't know. It's given me a lot to think about, but I do have a key takeaway that I've got that I wrote that I was quite proud of.
Okay.
That again, I don't know if I was meant to have one or not. I don't know. But I basically have decided for myself that to say that your interpretation is wrong and mine is right is like poison. That is bad. You cannot do that. Then to frame the artwork in a way that backs up your own interpretation to use as evidence against someone else is even worse. And quite a lot of film, game, TV debates kind of come down to doing that. And we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
You cannot say to someone, what you took away from it is wrong because what I took away from it is right. And here's the reasons why. Here's my lampposts. You can't do that.
We've circled back round to The Last of Us Part 2 again, have we?
Yeah.
It's gone full circle.
Yeah. I'm just going to quickly have a look at the we've got quite a lot of questions, and we have answered quite a lot of them accidentally by just kind of going through. Ali DeBear, who I'm going to go as far as to say friend of the show because I turn up for every single stream, has said, I read some of the Steam reviews for the game. People said the game was too depressing and lacked any happy moments. Do you think this is accurate, or would you say it was an exaggeration?
It's a short game. Like, I feel like I wouldn't want to play a 10-hour version of that game. But I feel like it has its theme and it has its message, or does it? And I feel like it's, for the length it is, like just over an hour, like that's fine. I felt like it's not trying to be fun. Like that's not the intention.
It does have moments of brevity. Like it does have a couple of jokes.
Yeah,
a couple of lines that are quite funny. Like it's only an hour and a half. It's fine. I can suffer for about 3 hours before I need to break. So it's fine by me. Okay, so Josh Iyer, another friend of the show. We've kind of already answered this, but just in case you've got anything else you want to say, they've said, as a creative person myself, I've had a very profound and emotional reaction when going through this game that hit way closer to home than I would have ever thought. Did you have any particular reactions or gain any new perspectives when thinking about your own creative work? Other than the ones we've just talked about.
Yeah, I feel like for like what I do in terms of for what I've done creatively that has had an audience, there's just so little crossover. But I really want to hear more from Josh about what his cover. I wish he went into more detail about how it's related to him and his creative endeavors.
Leave your interpretations below. But remember,
Josh is very, very regular in the comments. So if you write your comments and then everyone else can kind of read it if you want to explain any more.
Yeah. And the last one I'd like to read out is from Taran5. This is a great question and comment. Something I realised is that it's sometimes necessary to use a creator's past experience to understand their work, but it's wrong to hyper-analyse a creator's work to ascribe traits, motivations, and experiences to them. What message did you guys take away? And obviously I had my key takeaway, but I think that they really hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, it's when it gets to the point where Davey's getting so personal about saying like this, it's almost like saying like this game is a video game representation of Coda. And it's like, it's just not, like say if he made he made God of War, like he's not saying that he's like a big muscly man and he like what, it's just, he's reading so much into it. And when he's getting to the point saying about like, oh, it's almost like a cry for help, or it's him saying I'm lonely or depressed or whatever. And it's like, no, you can't jump to that assumption.
Yeah.
And you constantly call Coda a friend. Like if they're a friend and like, like the takeaway is what you do through your friendship, not the way you read into their artwork. It's the conversations you have with them and how you actually see them, asking them how they are in real life. That's the way, to see if there's a cry for help, not to overanalyze the deep staircase in their video game project that they didn't even want you to play.
and Davey, as far as he says, he was present during all this. So was he not asking the questions at the time? Like, there is some low moments in this game, like going up the stairs and you get stuck and the room at the top is full of ideas. Like, it's a pretty on the nose metaphor for like creative block. So there is things in the game like that. And if Davey was there during that time, why wasn't he asking these questions? And all he says is things like, "Oh, I feel like Coda really needed someone who could give them good advice." It's like, what were you doing?
Well, there is a bit where Davey says like Coda refused to like say what their thoughts were. Like, there is a line where it's basically Davey's obviously constantly asking Coda like, "So why did you do this?" And Coda's like, "Don't worry about it." Like Coda just doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I wonder what sort of game Coda would have released if they ever did, because I kind of feel like they're kind of taking the mick a bit out of art games with quite a lot of their games.
Yeah, funny if they just released like a Leather Suit Larry or whatever it is, or just
Leisure Suit Larry.
Leisure Suit Larry, or just some weird like.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've pretty much covered everything that I would like to say. Is there anything more you'd like to add?
No, I think we've spoke for almost the length the game took to complete. Going back to your talk about like using the art, like I do feel like I've just unfortunately used basically all of the footage for the game. So hopefully you did heed my plea to go and buy the game before listening to this. Yeah,
but also no narration. So
from seeing the footage. And I think even from our conversation, as Ollie said, it would be interesting to go and play it again. Like, even if you have listened to this and this has like made you think like, oh, this actually sounds interesting. Like we've kind of spoilt parts of it, but going in with that knowledge, like you can kind of still listen to it and it will still be interesting. And we didn't speak much about the audio, but there's quite a lot of music in the game, which I think is quite good and works quite well.
It is good. Yeah. I especially liked the island level. We didn't even talk about the island hopping one.
Yeah, then when you answer the question, the little like who goes like like when the pebbles appear, it's quite nice.
Yeah. Thanks. Good impression as well. Cheers for that.
You always have a go at my impressions because I'm so bad at them when you're good at them. Anyway, right, let's put it on the list. I
think the discussion you have around art is much more important than finding the solution.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a jigsaw.
Yeah. Make sure you include that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. We just said it more succinctly than the rest. But I'll tell you what, have you got the list up ready? Because we can just go straight back in and we can include that as well. You see, even when we're not podcasting, we're still podcasting.
That might be one of the deepest conversations we've ever had.
Yeah, possibly.
We've never really talked about art. Yeah, we've been to an art gallery together.
We have done.
And I just took a picture of you looking at a giant peanut and I was like, look at this idiot.
I also remember that there was a giant city made out of couscous at the Tate Modern.
Yes, there was.
Okay, then, so this is going to be our 22nd entry onto the list.
Wow. 22nd, eh? God, we've almost been doing this a year.
Yeah, if it's 2 a month, isn't it?
Yeah, so 26 will be our year anniversary. Wow, that's come around quick.
Does it feel quick for you? I feel like I've been doing this forever. It's like the amount it's taken over my life.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Anyway, I realised that. So you mentioned to me the other day, I think yesterday, that you like it when, like, cause I've in the past tried to not play my hand too early, whether I enjoyed the game or what my thoughts were. And you kind of said you like the opposite. You kind of like it when we're up front. We all know where the other person's coming from.
I think it makes an easier conversation and a better episode, personally.
Oh, yeah. I'm fine to do that. But I think this one we kind of both accidentally, we really haven't said too much about like how much I guess we enjoyed this game. Yeah. So what area are you thinking of before we get to a specific number?
I'm thinking probably between 10 and 16. 17.
Okay.
So it's not a top 10 game. It's it's a curiosity, it's something to look at and think about for an hour and a half, talk about with your friends. but it's not going to be winning any Game of the Year awards or knocking anything off the top 10, I don't think.
Okay. I'm always a bit more relaxed now because when like I played it and but I agree with everything you've just said. But when you said about like, oh, I've made more notes for this game than anything else, I was like, oh god, like this is like touched his soul in some way. like this is like.
I mean, it did give me a lot to think about. But I mean, a lot of those lessons that it was, I assume it was trying to teach me, I'd already figured out for myself. So
yeah. So for me, I would say I wouldn't want to put it above
Halo Infinite.
Pardon?
Halo Infinite. It's not going above Halo.
No, I wouldn't want to put it above Halo. I'm around. So, well, I'd want to put it above World of Warcraft. But
Same. World
of Warcraft's in a weird place for me because I'd also put like most of the games under World of Warcraft above it. So it's kind of weird. So I would definitely not want. I'm kind of Onimusha, Zero Ranger, World of Warcraft. So that's 15, 16, 17. I'm looking at that kind of zone.
Right. What about 15?
Above Zero Ranger.
15? That's kind of in the middle of where we both said.
So, and put World of Warcraft down?
Down, yeah.
Yeah, no, that I think that fits in perfectly for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want World of
Easy.
Warcraft above it. And Ratchet and Clank, I think, is just such a solid game.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair place to put it.
Yeah, there we go. Boom.
So a little bit disappointed we didn't get to have a debate, but I guess if we're both in agreement, then...
Yeah. Well, the game is kind of short enough and simple enough that there's your takeaway from it, but in terms of gameplay, there's not going to be a lot of discrepancy. You can walk forward and click. Like...
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you can there's some people that play that go like, it's boring.
Of course.
I like the shoot a bit, but there should have been more enemies,
Well, one of the notes in the bit where you find the notes from other players was like, when do you get the gun?
Yeah, there was a few bits like that, like saying it's boring and stuff. Yeah, that did make me laugh. I feel like when I was about like maybe a third of the way through, I was more excited about it because I loved the way that I was like, I'm thinking of like Coda and what they were thinking when they made the game. I'm thinking about Davey and their interpretation of the game and then the way they're presenting it. Then I'm also thinking about real Davey, the actual creator of everything, and what they were thinking to create both characters and then what they want us to think to put to us. And it's rare that you're thinking about intentions for two fictional characters and a developer.
It's like
and I found that super interesting. But then when it got to the ending and it just gave up on the format and it was, as you say, like it was just someone talking to you. And then I'm like, well, what am I playing now? I'm not saying that's wrong, but I found that less interesting than if they stuck with the format and left hints, even not very subtle hints about what they wanted the message to be. And like Davey's revelation about what Coda is actually trying to very directly say to him. But Davey was still almost desperately hanging on and still wanted to release this thing just in case. Or even if like Davey had a realization while making it, but then did a very real upfront like, hey, like all of the commentary you've listened to, I recorded last week and that's how I felt. I have now, while putting this together, I've come to realize that I actually think this and I think what I did was wrong. Like, even if there was something like that, but it still fit in the format, I think I would have enjoyed it
DLC,
more.
Wouldn't it? That'd be a good little free update. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Oh, 6 years later, this is how I feel now. Like,
yeah. Or even like interrupting
how
it.
To,
like Davey's mid-sentence saying like, why did he make this labyrinth like this? And then Davey cuts in and says like, hey, this is me now. Like, I was wrong to do this and I've now realized it with this time. And you know what? I've spoke to Coda and we've built up our friendship. And Coda's going to be like, and Coda joins in the conversation. Like, I feel like that would have been like a cool way to, obviously not exactly that, but I feel like there was a way to tie up the ending while keeping it in the format of this was a documentary game released to Steam and they break the format at the end. And I found that the least enjoyable part of the game.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't comment on what the ramifications would be if they had tied it up nicely at the end, given the rest of the game. being very much open to interpretation.
No, I don't mean tie it up in terms of here's the resolution, this is the meaning. Yeah. All I mean is just keep it in the format that this in some way was released. Even if it's like, Davey didn't release this thing, but someone else found it and released it. Or so, like just like it just completely goes off what it's set up to be. And there's hundreds of ways it could have been rounded out at the end to keep it in that format. I think I would have preferred that, and maybe it could have ended up higher on the list. But that isn't what this was, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the way that this was. I think it was great, as it was anyway.
Yeah, right. I think we're there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for picking this game, Ollie. I hadn't even heard of it. I hadn't even heard of it until you mentioned it, so it wasn't on my radar whatsoever, despite me absolutely loving the Stanley Parable. Yeah,
well, maybe that's part of what's his name, Davey's frustrations with you can see coming through the game. Oh, don't overread it. But the other guy that made Stanley Parable, because there's two of them, he went on to work with Justin Roiland on all of those Squanch games, whatever they're called. So they went and made that, and then he was kind of on his own and has made this.
Okay.
But read into that what you will. I'm not going to...
Do you know if he's made anything else since? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
He's
here,
got another game.
Older game.
He's made a new company, so Everything Unlimited Limited is not... I don't know if they're around anymore, but he's made a new company and they're making a new game. I don't know what it is.
Okay, cool. And just to cover our basis for Stanley Parable, I know we have had a few comments of people wanting us to play it. We won't. The reason we chose this instead is because we've both already played Stanley Parable, and also it's very well known. There's a lot of discussions like this about it. I feel like there's less for us to add, and I think there's a good chance that you listening to this probably hadn't heard of this game until now.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's probably a bit more value to this, and it's always exciting when we're playing a game that neither of us have played, because we both have like completely fresh views. So yeah, that's why we chose this game, and it's shorter.
And it's shorter, yeah. Would you like to hear what's coming up?
Love to.
So next time, can you believe at last we have Death Stranding? That has been looming on the horizon for what feels like months.
Can't come soon enough. The amount that I need to say about that game.
Then we have, so that's September 23rd. Then we have Yoshi's Island, October 7th with a guest. Then we have Resident Evil Remake, October 21st. And then we stopped there last time, but we do have the next one locked in.
Well, yeah, if we got the next one locked in.
It's Beyond Good and Evil, November 4th.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and then after that,
we're going to do
the
that's the HD. It's not remake, but that's the 360 version of it. That will be, not the PS2 one.
I might play it on PC if I feel like just tearing my hair out. What's left of it?
Yeah, there's something that I didn't really mention too much, but the idea is this went to be a short game we could do quickly. I spent the whole day trying to be able to play this, and I had to fight so hard to not let it affect my opinion on the game itself. I did wonder if we'd end up getting to a conversation about preserving video games and what it will be in the future to play games. I did wonder if we'd come round to that, but it feels
maybe another time.
When it's a game by just one creator, like a small game, it's hard to point the finger and say, you're not updating it for PCs that have come out 7 years after you released your game. It's hard to put any blame, but it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And then after that, November 18th, we have a guest, and I don't know what the game is, so we're going to find out together.
I know what the game might be, but they haven't wanted to commit 100%. But I will be seeing this guest soon.
Off of the air, can you tell me what it might be? I need to know. I need to get it.
Okay, I'll tell you what it is. Oh man, yeah, I will do. What it could be is a funny one, but I will twist their arm when I next see them and make them commit. There's a few choices that were all fine choices, so it's not like there's not one they could choose. It's just there's so many options. It's hard to pick one down. But yeah, that's the end of this podcast here. Thank you all so much for listening towards the end. If you are on the audio only version, you want to see the list as it was before we added the beginner's guide, you can see it down below. There's going to be another one of these every other Friday. As we said, the next one we're doing is Death Stranding. If you haven't started playing it already, you're probably too late to join in the conversation because it's a very long game. But make sure you don't miss the next one, because no matter what, the next podcast is going to be a fun one. Is that we're going to have some fun conversations about that game. So it's one I'm looking forward to. So hopefully you are as well. But apart from that, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.